This year's redrawing of congressional maps is threatening to make it harder for a handful of House Democrats to hold on to their seats. According to the Brennan Center, Republicans will control redistricting in 181 House districts this year. Democrats will be in charge of drawing new boundaries for 74 districts. Those numbers could change once the 2020 census results come in. The data has been delayed by the pandemic, but states like Florida, North Carolina, and Texas are expected to gain seats due to their growing populations. Elections experts say it could help the GOP retake the House in 2022. As Politico reports, that's compelling some vulnerable Democratic incumbents to consider aiming higher by running for statewide office. For more on this, let's bring in Politico congressional reporter Sarah Ferris. Hi there, Sarah. Welcome. Which incumbent House Democrats are most likely to consider running for a higher office, and how would you characterize their districts?
So right now we're looking at Democratic incumbents like Tim Ryan of Ohio, Connor Lamb of Pennsylvania. These are two Democrats whose districts are going to be very tough going forward, especially someone like Connor Lamb already has a really tough district. Just a little bit of moving of the population in his district would really complicate things. Both of them acknowledged to Politico that they know that their races are going to be tougher going forward, and both of them are seriously looking at the Senate. There's others who the redistricting processes are a little bit less clear. We're thinking of Democrats like Stephanie Murphy in Florida. We're looking at another Democrat in Florida, Charlie Crist, who might be looking at another run for governor. And it's just clear that this is part of their calculation going forward. Now, the problem is that they're not going to know for several more months or maybe even a year what their districts are going to look like. And that's just one more nudge towards this kind of statewide race that could help them float above this sort of redistricting really drama that's been going on at the state level.
So if they do end up running for higher office, what are the pros and cons for the Democratic Party as a whole?
So, of course, it would be great for Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer to have a seasoned bench of Democratic incumbents who could try to run statewide, especially some of those with moderate swing district appeal. Someone like Tim Ryan, Connor Lamb, as I mentioned earlier, they're Democrats who think they could appeal to a statewide level that would possibly help capture even more control of the Senate for Democrats in 2022. But those same Democrats who have really excelled at running in their own districts, having those disappear from the House landscape would be, problematic for Democratic campaign officials. They already are facing some, real headwinds going into the 2022 elections. This is a midterm that's historically tough for whichever party is in power, and of course that is the Democrats right now. They're already worried about being sent into the minority in 2 years. So you don't want to lose some of your strongest moderate Democrats. The House campaign officials will want them to keep running. But, if their districts aren't going to be winnable, if that's not going to be possible, they're much more likely to look at a statewide race.
On another topic, Politico reports that the Democratic Party is considering a major overhaul of its primary calendar. What's behind that push, and which states would now be ahead on the primary calendar?
So this is something that really came up just a year ago when we were all looking at the primaries really closely. And Iowa, of course, came under scrutiny for how white its population is compared to some of these other states that are a little bit behind Iowa in the schedule. South Carolina is obviously a big example of that. There was a lot of discussion in Democratic circles about why are states like Iowa and New Hampshire first when, as we saw with now President Joe Biden, South Carolina was critical to him, and that's one of the most diverse early states there is. So unsurprisingly, Democrats from South Carolina, such as House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, have been really leading this push. They'd like to see their states, which they argue are a better portrait of the Democratic Party across America, they'd like to see their states go first. They'd like to see their states have more say in the presidential contests. Harry Reid from Nevada has also been involved in these discussions. Nevada, again, a more diverse state than Iowa, and right now it goes behind Iowa in the primary schedule. So these wouldn't necessarily be major tweaks, but even having Iowa, which has been the first in the nation for so long, moving that schedule at all would be a really, really big change in the Democratic cycle, and it could have effects, just as we saw the influence of South Carolina had on Biden last year.
Yeah, I mean, we all remember on Red and Blue, we took the show on the road. That was the last time we were on the road before, in fact, things shut down because of the pandemic. And we remember the trajectory for Joe Biden, as you say, really changing after South Carolina. But you mentioned, so Jim Clyburn, Harry Reid, what other Democratic leaders have been having these conversations sort of, behind closed doors? You talked about what they're proposing, but who actually has that final say then?
Well, this will be a DNC decision, and these conversations are really early. They're just starting, so nobody really wants to get out too far ahead and say what may or may not happen. But it's really clear that someone like Jim Clyburn, who's the #3 Democrat in the House, someone like Harry Reid, the former Senate Majority Leader, these are really influential people, and they have a lot of friends in high places. And if they're making the push for this, I think this is something that all Democrats should be on the lookout for. Especially, as you said, we saw the tides of this in the early primary cycle of this last race, and how many Democrats were really rethinking this sort of trajectory. So I think the momentum has already been there, and now you have some influential voices getting involved, and it's definitely something to be on the lookout for as the DNC looks ahead to its calendar for the next election, which seems like a long time away, but it's really not that far.
Oh my gosh, time to rethink that primary wardrobe, that if the changes are in fact something that happened. No more winter clothes, perhaps, not with Iowa if Iowa doesn't go first. All right, Sarah Ferris. Sarah, good to have you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.